what was happening. I told him that it was literally gross negligence. Nobody cared. They weren't coding patients that were, a code blue. They would just let them go. And, then reporting to the families like that they did everything they could when I know that for a fact that they didn't. And when I saw that, that's when I realized like nobody is going to believe this. No one's going to believe that this is happening without proof. And so I contacted a couple New York attorneys, and we decided that I needed to go undercover. So I did.
This patient is in with like a non-COVID. I don't understand why they're doing that.
I know. There's 4 patients in a row here non-COVID. And this is supposed to be the COVID.
Yeah.
Because 7th floor, they shut it down.
That's right. I'm confused.
And then they're going to have non-COVID there.
Yeah.
This is going to be the only COVID, so they shouldn't put any non-COVIDs here.
Well, that's what they've been doing. The guy over in 29, I had him upstairs because I was on CCU before it.
Yeah.
And he came in with a stroke.
I know, that's what 26-1 was, a stroke.
And no COVID, and now he's got COVID, and he's on a vent.
Well, because we gave it to him here.
My attorney dropped off a pair of spyglasses for me. I got audio recording software for my phone, and I started recording.
My bigger problem with this whole scenario is when they intubate people who don't need it.
Yeah.
And it looks very clear to me that they're just pushing it.
It was like the day before intubation, he was fine on the rebreather.
And then they intubated, and then he got a pneumo, and then they put in a PEP tube, and then it's been shipped.
And now he's 37 years old and dead.
This isn't what my profession stands for. We can't look away. We're mandatory reporters. Like, this is our job, to protect the patient. As nurses, we're patient advocates. Our oath is to do no harm, and that's all that was being done. There were very few actual ICU doctors running these floors. They had residents in. There was ophthalmologists, dentists, people that had absolutely no clue what they were doing. Maybe, 2 or 3 respiratory therapists for the entire hospital, when we needed respiratory therapists for the ventilators because nobody knew how to run them, which also caused death. So they would blow out these patients' lungs and then call it a day. Next patient in, same thing.
Nearly 2,000 people have tested positive for coronavirus. That's bad, and this is worse. Hospitals there are getting ready tonight for a surge. Meantime, Governor Ned Lamont toured a facility manufacturing ventilators for critical care patients. 34 people have died, and federal officials just approved a disaster declaration for the state, and that will allow all 8 counties to be reimbursed for costs associated with the response to the pandemic.
Patients coming into the emergency room would be given no options, and they would be told, if you're not admitted, you're going to die, essentially. You need to get admitted. And so they did. Fear is a very, very strong emotion. And when people are unaware of what's going on, obviously they're going to trust us. But nobody was telling the truth.
The Comfort now is just pulling into dock here in Midtown Manhattan.
They could have went to the Comfort shed, where, if they didn't have COVID, that was meant for them, but it was just bypassed. Governor Cuomo said that they were running out of space and they needed extra hospital beds for the patients that didn't have COVID. And so President Trump at the time sent the ship, and the ship was never utilized because they were ordered to stand down. They admitted everybody to these hospitals. They stuffed them in like sardines because there was financial incentive to do so. It was $13,000 to admit these patients to the hospitals, another $39,000 to put them on a ventilator. And then in some cases, people were worth $10,000 per death, with no liability to any of the hospitals, any of the staff, any of the doctors, any of the nurses.
It's worrying health officials who call mass vaccinations the only path to a return to normalcy. Almost 4 months into the vaccination effort, providers are beginning to run out of people who want to be immunized.
Our death rates are too high. Here's what we know. We know that the people who are dying from this disease are 11-fold more likely to pass if they are.
We expect their conversation to be wide-ranging, to cover a range of topics of mutual interest, everything from COVID-19 and our efforts to address the global pandemic to mutual interest, everything from COVID-19 and our efforts to address the global pandemic, about why it's important to get vaccinated, why these vaccines are safe, why they can still kill you even if you are under the age of 27. We need to be clear and direct about our messaging.
Build a wall high enough to keep it out. There's no wall high enough or ocean wide enough to keep us safe from the vaccine and from the COVID-19 in other countries.
The global pandemic.
An Australian biotech company has developed a new treatment it hopes will prevent people dying from COVID vaccine.
I'm delighted that uptake of the vaccine is now 95% amongst over 60s, and that protection against dying from the vaccine is around 85%.
Dying from the vaccine?
95%. And that protection against dying from the vaccine is around 85%.
So they are older people, 70 years of age and older. We know they are just so vulnerable to getting ill and dying from this vaccine. 70 years of age and older. We know they are just so vulnerable to getting ill and dying from this vaccine.
And finally, a little bit about the National Guard. The federal government continues to take aggressive action and proactive steps to address the COVID-19 threat as we attack the health and safety or protect the health and safety of the American people. Attack the health and safety or protect the health and safety of the American people.
We will be looking at what contact tracing looks like in the New World Order.
We must treat this New World Order, this new world of COVID, we must treat this new world of COVID even in our own homes.
So the current situation is this. If you have COVID and you end up in the hospital, you're put on a rigid protocol and there's high mortality rate in the hospital, and your family is kept in the dark as to what's happening. So what's going on here? Number one, the CARES Act is providing bonus payments to hospitals whenever you have a diagnosis of COVID. And then number two, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services is waiving patient rights. This is a deadly combination. So here's what happens. You get a payment because you offer a free COVID test in the emergency room. You get a boost payment if you have a diagnosis of COVID. Number three, you get another bonus payment if you are admitted with COVID. Number four, you get another bonus payment if you're put on remdesivir. Number five, another bonus payment if you're put on a mechanical ventilator. Number six, another 20% bonus if the diagnosis on your death certificate says COVID, even though you may not have died from COVID. And then number seven, there's bonus payments to coroners. Do you understand the gravity of what's happening right now? The Biden administration is literally paying hospitals to kill you. That's what's happening. This is terrible. We need to stop that. These are real human lives we're talking about. They're priceless. It's estimated at about $100,000 per patient is what the hospital is getting. Think about that. Ladies and gentlemen, the real news of right now continues.
So, anybody heard about Kristen the Piston? Anybody heard about how my father was murdered with remdesivir? Has anybody heard about how the hospital called me and blamed me and my mom because we weren't vaccinated and that was the reason he died? Anybody heard about how they put my dad on palliative care and they never fed him and they starved him to death? And they only gave him 1 can of Ensure in 9 days? Anybody hear about that? Anybody hear about how they put my dad in bilateral restraints, restrained him against his will, and pumped him full of remdesivir against his and his family wishes? While they called me and blamed me and told me he was dying because I wouldn't take the vaccine? Has anyone heard this story? Anyone? You heard this story yet? You heard about how my dad was murdered in a worse way than people on death row? Do you hear me? People on death row are treated more humanely than my father. He wasn't able to use a goddamn phone. Are you listening to me? Everybody, people want me to act all nice about this shit, man. Fuck you! Fuck you! This shit is bullshit. They murdered my father. They injected him with poison. They lied to me. They blame me. You want me to act normal? Sit here and make videos like everything's okay? So we can watch Rebel News go up to Albert Bourla and do nothing? Nothing! Is that what you want? Fuck you!
Hi, I'm Kate Shimrani, natural nurse in a toxic world, co-founder of the British Nursing Alliance and health advisor and nurse on Sons of Liberty Radio USA. Jeremy Hunt has just announced as Chancellor that he's going to allow social services and the government to take 100,000 from our elderly's assets when they go into the hospitals and the social care settings. Why is that significant? Well, anyone who's been watching any of my recent interviews where I've talked about the protocol NG191, which has been replacing the NG163. This is the end-of-life pathway which they are putting the elderly and disabled on in the hospitals. And that pathway involved morphine and midazolam with NG163, and now it is remdesivir, benzodiazepines and opioids, which is lorazepam as well. And our country has just ordered huge amounts of lorazepam, and it may interest you to know that in February 2020, the shares for lorazepam in 1 month went up by 34%. So they knew worldwide that this was going to be used. Now, they are putting more and more people on this end-of-life pathway, and you can go and look up the Palliative Care Funding Review. And that Palliative Care Funding Review tells you that they're going to be increasing the palliative care, and it also gives you on one of those pages on that Palliative Care Funding Review, which is page 64, it tells you the amount that the deaths of the elderly is going to go up by 2031, which is when their plan goes up to. Now, we have the planned tariff incentivized euthanasia point system in this country, and at this moment 1,642.5 patients must be euthanized in England alone every day, and that includes disabled children, in order for hospitals to get their money. And this is also extended in the care homes. If they go below that target, they lose money. If they go above that target, they gain money.
I don't have to remind many Americans that the Center for Disease Control was the one that said you should use DDT in your homes.
Used right, it is absolutely harmless to humans and animals. Remember the name, DDT. It spells certain death.
A scientific panel today reported that pesticides may indeed represent a grave threat to mankind.
Remember the swine flu scare of 1976? That was the year the U.S. government told us all that swine flu could turn out to be a killer, and Washington decided that every man, woman, and child in the nation should get a shot to prevent a nationwide outbreak, a pandemic. Well, 46 million of us obediently took the shot.
Did anyone ever come to you and say, there's the possibility of neurological damage if you get into a mass immunization program?
No.
No one ever did?
No. I can't believe that they would say that they did not know that there were neurological illnesses associated with influenza vaccination. That simply is not true. We did know that.
Then he's lying.
I guess you would have to make that assumption.
Then why does this report from your own agency list neurological complications as a possibility? You didn't feel it was necessary to tell the American people that information.
Dr. Sensor's CDC also helped create the advertising to get the public to take the shot.
The vaccines are safe, so roll up your sleeve.
And now Americans are claiming damages from Uncle Sam amounting to $3.5 billion. By far the greatest number of the claims, 2/3 of them, are for neurological damage or even death.
There are serious concerns tonight about how well the CDC controls dangerous germs at its own labs after yet another safety lapse.
For the third time in a month, the CDC acknowledged deadly pathogens were handled incorrectly in government labs.
That CDC is the CDC that allegedly is looking out for your public health.
Around the same time that John D. Rockefeller seized U.S. media, he also hijacked U.S. medicine. When it was discovered that drugs could be produced from petroleum, America's top oil mogul ordered his army of propagandists to invert reality accordingly. Medicines used for thousands of years were suddenly classified as alternative, while the new, petroleum-based, highly addictive, and patentable drugs were declared the gold standard. After buying the German pharmaceutical company that manufactured chemicals of war for Adolf Hitler, Rockefeller leveraged his political influence by pressing Congress to declare natural healing modalities unscientific quackery. Rockefeller then took control of the American Medical Association and began offering massive grants to top medical schools under the mandate that only his approved curriculum be taught. Any mention of the healing powers of herbs, plants, and diet was erased from most medical textbooks. Doctors and professors who objected to Rockefeller's plan were crucified by the media, removed from the AMA, and stripped of their license to teach and practice medicine. Those who dared to speak out were arrested and jailed. When evidence began to emerge that petroleum-based medicines were causing cancer, Mr. Rockefeller founded the American Cancer Society, through which he suppressed that information. John D. Rockefeller is duly credited as the founder of the pharmaceutical industry, and the reason that medical error is currently the third leading cause of death in America. This is not an indictment against doctors. More than anyone, they are under the stranglehold of the single largest lobbying power in Washington. Every year, the pharmaceutical industry spends at least twice the amount as big oil to influence laws, policies, and public perception. Thanks to Mr. Rockefeller, the architect of American monopolies, no industry has more power over our lives than Big Pharma.
Very interesting things about the Spanish flu. First of all, it didn't start in Spain. Secondly, it wasn't a flu. There's more, but let's start with these two, shall we? If it didn't start in Spain, then where did it? In the US. If it wasn't a flu virus, what was it? It was a bacteria that caused severe and in most cases lethal pneumonia. According to a 2008 National Institute of Health paper, bacterial pneumonia was the killer in a minimum of 92.7% of the autopsies reviewed. So why do we call it the Spanish flu? As a decoy, a smokescreen to hide the truth. Because people prefer to hear a convenient lie. The first cases of bacterial pneumonia in 1918 traced back to a military base in Fort Riley, Kansas. During the first half of 1918, an experimental bacterial meningitis vaccine cultured in horses by the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research in New York, now the Rockefeller University, was injected into soldiers at Fort Riley. The so-called Spanish flu was a vaccine experiment gone horribly wrong. Well, that's what we, the people, would say. The cabal would refer to it differently. They would call it an experiment with the best outcome ever. Millions of American soldiers were vaccinated with this experimental serum. 2 million of them went overseas. They fought under poor sanitary conditions, so the bacteria spread like wildfire wherever they went. The story was then spread that these soldiers would come home with all sorts of European diseases, so the American population was vaccinated as well. On top of everything else, the vaccines were distributed all over Europe. Only the vaccinated died. Healthy men and women in the prime of their lives died, not the elderly, as would have been the case if it were a flu virus. Who was in charge of that distribution and mass vaccination program? The Rockefeller Institute. Who was the main scientist in charge? Dr. Frederick Gates. According to Gates, they injected random dosages of an experimental bacterial meningitis vaccine into soldiers. Those who survived became cloud adults, meaning they spread the bacteria to others, even the non-vaccinated. Amazing coincidence, right? Frederick Gates then, Bill Gates now. Rockefeller Initiative then, Rockefeller Initiative now. Close down societies then, close down societies now. All for our own good, our own safety. Back then and now.
There is no history of any vaccine saving so much as one life. In fact, they are bioweapons, and if you give them to a young child, and the younger the child, the more destructive they are to that immune system. And so it's a combination. It's a combination. If you know where the WHO comes from, I think I put a note down here to where it comes from. But anyway, it was started up by Rockefeller. And what was Rockefeller into? Eugenics. Euthanasia and eugenics. That was Rockefeller back in the 30s. They own the WHO. They own the NIH. So now the game is, these people aren't dying fast enough. We can make a lot more money, and they'll die a lot faster if we put out these vaccines and we use them on small children. Children first. And then we make it compulsory. Then we can even say the kid can't go to school unless he's vaccinated. Mandatory vaccines are murder in the first degree. That is what they are. You're invading a person's body with poisons, and the shock is horrible. In real life, you don't have to deal with 10 different germs, viruses at once, usually one at a time. But when they give a child a vaccine, or anybody, but children the worst, and that system is soaking up in an instant all these poisons I just listed here, plus a lot of viruses, they don't tell you what they are. The immune system, especially of a child, just throws up its hands in horror and says, I can't cope. This is too much. This is not like real life. They give you an overwhelming amount of poisons at one time. And that's what happens. You will get your children will get all kinds of diseases. All kinds of them, because your system, your whole neurological system is attacked. Your brain is attacked. It goes past the brain-blood barrier. They're using nanotechnology in these vaccines. This is murder. Indeed, it is murder. If the child isn't debilitated, it will die, and now they change the law. You can't even sue them. So I'm saying the effect of all this poison in one needle at one time to anyone, but especially a child, it just destroys the immune system, the neurological system. That's it. That is murder. I'm sorry, it's murder. Whether you die in 10 years, 5 years, or you're blinded, or you're in a wheelchair, it's murder in the first degree, and they're all working on that. That's what a vaccine is.
That it's a one-shot vaccine with very fast efficacy achieved and 100% compliance, so to speak. That it's a one-shot vaccine with very fast efficacy achieved and 100% compliance, so to speak.
Some people have even taken to wearing protection on the streets. Why are you wearing this mask, sir?
I don't know, just feel safer.
Okay, thank you. Katie, the folks at the Atlanta Disease Control Center told me that these masks wouldn't stop a flu germ with a hangover.
I don't know how many different ways I can say this. This so-called super flu does not exist.
Then what is it? Why is everybody talking about it?
I don't know why everybody's talking about it. I don't know where the rumors are coming from. It must be a figment of the press's imagination. I don't know why I'm up here answering these questions. I don't have the answers, because there's no such thing.
על הגויים, לא על עם ישראל.
The corona is for the non-Jews. It's not for Am Yisrael. It's not for the Jews. Smile.
some governments and corporations, for the first time in history, have the power to basically hack human beings. There is a lot of talk about hacking computers, hacking smartphones, hacking bank accounts, but the big story of our era is the ability to hack human beings. And by this I mean that if you have enough data and you have enough computing power, you can understand people better than they understand themselves, and then you can manipulate them in ways which were previously impossible. And in such a situation, the old democratic system stopped functioning. We need to reinvent democracy for this new era in which humans are now hackable animals. You know, the whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over. We need to come to terms with the fact that, no matter, again, this is where philosophy meets computer science and biology.
You will have such a good digital twin that you'll be able to go into the metaverse, into a virtual reality world, turn a dial, pull a switch, feel around, and actually change it in the real planet.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is not far off. I mean, the physical and the digital worlds, they will grow together, and the result is exactly what you just said.
I wanted to ask when you all think we're going to move from this form factor to something that's on your face, glasses, and when computing's all on the edge.
All right, 50 seconds. Who wants to answer quickly?
I think it will go. It will. First of all, it will definitely happen. I was talking about 6G earlier, which is around 2030. I would say that by then, definitely the smartphone as we know it today will not anymore be the usual kind of the most common interface. Wow. Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies. Wow. Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies.
And I have to say, in my memory, you were one of the most engaged and hardest working participants here at the annual meeting.
Dr. Schwab, I'm flattered you'd asked me to keynote. You've written extensively on the topic that you've asked me to speak to, mastering the fourth industrial revolution. Mastering the fourth industrial revolution.
The Federal Reserve is considering a digital dollar. The implications for privacy and freedom are frightening.
This is Richard Werner, the top academic scholar in the world on central banking.
The nature of this CBDC, what is it actually going to look like? They never talk about that. Right. But I heard one European central banker tell me what it's going to look like. He saw it. And it was around this large and would be implanted under your skin.
CBDC. If that happens, we're done.
So you might have missed what happened Wednesday afternoon at the Fed, but they started their CBDC. Maybe we should start having the conversation of, gosh, this looks like the mark of the beast.
COVID makes it accelerates the process of digitalization and automatization. It legitimizes the deployment of mass surveillance, and it makes surveillance go under your skin.
Nobody wants to know what's in the vaccines because, look, if people understood what was in the vaccine, they'd go apeshit.
And you see, the difference of this fourth industrial revolution is it doesn't change what you are doing. It changes you if you take a genetic editing.
And he caused all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name.
We are going to become gods. Period. If you don't like it, get off. You don't have to contribute. You don't have to participate. But if you're going to interfere with me becoming God, you're going to have big trouble. God will help you.